So I've worked on Wall Street and have been investing for nearly a decade now. And in this video, I want to walk you through my personal investing plan for 2026 and also a couple of really big things that I'm watching closely so you can put yourself in the best financial position possible in 2026. But first, I want to cover a couple of key things I'm watching very closely that basically determined my investing strategy for this year. All right, so we're going to be starting off with the economy and more specifically the impact of the big, beautiful bill. Now, personally, while I do think the bill very clearly favors the wealthy over the average person, there are a couple of things in it that I believe will help stimulate the overall economy within the next year. I'm going to break it down into two main categories to focus on. The first one is on the consumer side. So consumer being people like you and me. In the big beautiful bill, there are a couple of new tax deductions that's going to allow people to save more money. For example, hourly workers can deduct up to a certain amount in overtime pay. Tips up to a certain amount are also excluded from federal taxes. And then also the SALT cap rises from 10K to 40K. On top of this, there is data coming out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows wages on average are growing a tiny bit more than the pace of inflation. It's nothing phenomenal, but it is trending in a positive direction. And then just combined with the tax savings, I am expecting more people and consumers to spend more money in 2026. The second category is on the business side. More specifically, the big beautiful bill allows corporations to regain 100% bonus depreciation and also allows them to immediately deduct research and development spending, which overall lowers the effective tax rates significantly for companies. So objectively speaking, while I do think that the big beautiful bill does disproportionately benefit the wealthy and is going to make our national budget deficit even worse, consumer spending is still a big driver of our economy. And I expect people, as well as businesses, to continue to spend even more money into 2026 because of the tax cuts, as well as the growth in real wages. We've also seen a lot more affordability issues being brought up near the end of 2025. And since 2026 is a midterm year, I believe that's going to be a big focus from the Trump administration to either lower tariffs to lower prices or be ruled illegal by the Supreme Court or even introduce new policies to address affordability issues, which should also help with consumer spending as well. By the way, if investing is your main focus this year, I am hosting my very first completely free live investing workshop on February 1st. I'm going to be teaching you everything from how to invest, what to invest in, as well as common mistakes to avoid. We're going to go into a lot more details, and again, it is completely free. If you're interested, you can sign up at vincenttchan.co/workshop, or you can scan the QR code or just click the link in the description to sign up before the door closes. Next, let's talk about rates. All right, so we ended 2025 with 3 consecutive rate cuts. And while these were not unanimous decisions, like there was some division within the Fed, I do strongly believe that the Federal Reserve will continue to cut interest rates this year. The main reason is that the current Fed chair, Jerome Powell, his term is set to end this year in May, and Trump has made it abundantly clear about how he wants to lower interest rates faster and more aggressively. And he even said on his Truth social media platform just before Christmas that anyone that disagrees with me will never be the Fed chairman. Meaning we are very likely to get a Trump yes man as the new Fed chair this year, who again is going to cut rates more aggressively and faster. Now, interest rates and the stock market typically have an inverse relationship, meaning when interest rates go down, stocks tend to go up because lower interest rates means it is cheaper to borrow money, which encourages two groups of people to spend more. First are the people, right? They're going to buy houses and cars. And number two are companies. They're going to use this cheap money to expand and grow, which remember, the big beautiful bill also has tax incentives there to encourage business spending, both of which is going to continue to lead to economic growth in 2026. On top of this, the Fed has basically restarted quantitative easing efforts, which is, again, what they did to restart the economy after the 2020 pandemic. I made an entire video over here breaking this down and what that means for your money. If you're interested, I'll also leave a link down below. But TLDR, the Fed is basically buying $40 billion in T-bills every single month, which is going to inject a ton of money into the economy and the financial markets, which is a good sign generally for the financial markets. Next, let's talk about corporate profits or earnings, because this one is a bit counterintuitive and very unexpected. All right, so corporate earnings is basically when companies report how much money they made, as well as what the profit was for that specific quarter. In 2025, corporate profits have been surprisingly pretty strong, which sounds great, but at the same time, nearly 1 million jobs have been cut. Now, typically layoffs like these, they happen when companies are struggling because they are not profitable or because they're losing money and they need to lower their expenses and their costs. But as we've been seeing quarter over quarter, companies have been hitting record profits. So what the heck is going on, right? So a big reason for all of this is AI, which is supposedly allowing these companies to maintain or even increase their productivity with even fewer workers, which explains this whole counterintuitive situation. Most banks and financial institutions expect corporate earnings and the profits to continue to increase in 2026. And generally, the more profits a company sees, the more likely people are going to invest in it. Now, while it's great to see our stocks grow because these companies are doing well, let's not forget that these are real people who are being impacted, like real people losing their jobs. And this is something that is not talked about nearly enough. And yes, maybe the younger group of people who are losing their jobs, maybe they have enough time to learn a new skill and get hired somewhere else. But there's also older people like your parents, right? Your grandparents who are in their 50s or 60s or even older, who maybe don't have the opportunity to reskill and get hired at a new place. All right, so those are more of the positive factors that I see impacting the overall stock market this year, but there are also 3 very big risks that I want to highlight before I share with you what my investing plan and strategy is for 2026. The first risk is that the stock market is potentially overvalued. All right, so now there are basically 2 camps to how you want to look at this. The first side, or camp A, the first side is basically pointing to these traditional metrics that we have historically used, such as the price to earnings ratio or the PE ratio, which basically measures how much investors are paying for each dollar of a company's earnings. Meaning the higher this PE ratio number is, the more expensive or overvalued that particular thing is. Historically, the average PE ratio for the S&P 500 is around 16, and nowadays it is hovering around 30. Which is why on this first side, right, people are saying we are due for a stock market correction, because when PE ratios were high like this, like in the early 2000s and early 2022, the market has fell sharply afterwards. But here's the thing, right? People have been warning about this stock market correction for the past couple of years, and the S&P 500 has continued to climb regardless. Now that brings us to the second side, all right, camp B. This side argues that the traditional metrics are missing the bigger picture. Because a high PE ratio doesn't always mean a correction is coming, right? So for example, in 2003, the S&P 500 started the year with a PE ratio of 32. And yet the S&P 500 still jumped 29% that year and returned an annualized average of 12.8% over the next 5 years. Similarly, 2021 began with a PE ratio of 38, and the S&P 500 still gained 29% that year. And even with 2022's correction, right, it still annualized 10% returns over 3 years. In addition, companies in the S&P 500, they are reporting record profit margins like we just mentioned, which could potentially justify these higher valuations if those margins are sustained. Now, of course, right, no one knows which side is right because no one can tell the future. But personally, I think at least for right now, what I've seen, right, given the continued expected record company profits, as long as those profits continue to hold, we'll need to see a much bigger catalyst or something to trigger some sort of reversal. Typically, this would look like the Fed increasing interest rates, or us falling into a recession, or anything like super bad, unexpected news that happens in the economy. But just based on what I'm seeing so far, right, with the market and the news, I don't see anything that we'll experience at least in the next 6 months. Now, that's not to say I am blindly optimistic, right? I am doing certain things to mitigate my downside risk, which I will be sharing a little bit later. Now, the second risk, and the one that I am most concerned about, long-term especially, is this K-shaped economy that we have been seeing, right? This is where people who have money have been getting richer, and those people without money have been struggling more. The reason for this is that inflation clearly hits people without money a lot harder because they don't own any stock market wealth, while people who do have money, they are less impacted by inflation because they do have assets. Data is coming out that more people are financially struggling, right? We're seeing an increase in people struggling to make loan payments. People are struggling to save money more than before. More concerns about higher prices, affordability, job security, like we've seen with AI, as well as concerns over the overall financial well-being. Specifically with the K-shaped economy, I don't see this improving anytime soon. In fact, I expect it to get worse in 2026 for a couple of reasons. Number one is that the cost of electricity in the US has been climbing a lot faster than overall inflation. Electric prices have jumped around 7% when they have been pretty stable for around 20 something years. And this is all thanks again to AI because of the data centers that need to power AI. All that extra demand is leading to higher electricity costs, and it's not like the AI race is going to slow down anytime soon. So we should expect that the demand is going to increase and the cost of electricity is going to continue to go up. Number 2 is health insurance for nearly 22 million Americans. These people are going to see their health insurance premiums skyrocket in the coming months. And number 3 is with jobs. I believe the economy is going to create far fewer jobs in 2026 as more companies start to integrate AI into their businesses. Now, fortunately or not, most of the consumer spending we see that drives the economy happens from the wealthy, people who have money, meaning the lower half, people who don't have money and are impacted the most from the K-shaped economy, we are likely not going to see immediate impacts on the stock market itself. But it's important to know long-term that this is definitely something that we should keep in mind. The next risk I see is a potential AI bubble. Now, I'm not going to get too much into this because many people have already talked about this issue, but basically there is a risk that the investments in AI companies and AI investments do not produce the revenues or the profits that they were expecting, which could lead to a significant reevaluation for those companies. Now, if you want me to make a dedicated video about the potential AI bubble, let me know in the comments. Now, taking everything into account, I personally do believe that the positives do outweigh the risk moving forward in 2026, especially given everything we've experienced in 2025, right? Despite all the changes we've seen in global trade with tariffs, as well as having the longest government shutdown in history, the US economy appears to be chugging along just fine. And honestly, I don't expect to see as much uncertainty going into this year. Now, before I go into my 2026 investment plan, I just want to quickly share my current portfolio and where I'm at by the end of 2025. So I turned 30 last year, and my portfolio allocation is split between 63% in stocks, 15% in investment real estate, 12% in cash, and 5% in short-term treasuries, which is essentially like cash, and 5% in crypto. So 2025 was a very big life-changing year for me, right? I bought my first multifamily house in New York City, which means it's partially an investment property. And the percentage that I shared earlier is based on the equity in the house that is divided by the part of it that is considered an investment property. I will say I'm holding on to a bit more cash than I usually would. And a big reason for this is just liquidity, right? Since I am a new homeowner, I don't really know what to expect in terms of capital expenditures. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that and get used to those expenses that are going to pop up. So I am trying to find a balance between being too cash heavy and just being comfortable where I am in case anything does happen with the house. I'm gonna get into my investing plan in just a second, but there is a lot of stuff that I can't really get into details, everything in this video. So if you wanna take this even further, like how to invest, some mistakes you want to avoid, again, I am hosting a completely free live workshop on February 1st. You can sign up with the link down below, QR code, or vincenttchan.co/workshop. Space is limited because I'm gonna be taking questions live at the end of it, so just make sure you sign up before the doors closed. All right, so my plan for 2026, right? I mainly want to reduce the amount of cash that I'm holding by continuing to dollar cost average into my 3 main investment pillars. And then with some of my fund money and my remaining cash, I'm gonna be tracking 4 very specific things. The first thing I'm tracking is the S&P 493, which is basically the rest of the stocks in the S&P 500 minus the Magnificent 7, which is Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, Nvidia, and Tesla. The reason is I am seeing company earnings growth for the Magnificent 7 that has slowed down from 2024 to 2025, while at the same time, I'm starting to see that the other 493 companies in the S&P 500, we're seeing that the earnings growth actually increase from the same time period. Meaning we might start to see some type of rotation from the big tech companies, right, the Magnificent 7, to other sectors. Many of those 493 companies were effectively left behind during the large stock market gains we've seen the past couple of years, so they could be benefiting in 2026 and beyond from a combination of improved earnings as well as just investors generally in reassessing what they are worth given the higher valuations in the Magnificent 7 and other bigger players. The point is, while I expect company earnings to continue to increase in 2026, I think we're going to see more growth happening outside of just the Magnificent 7. The next thing I'm looking closer at are small cap stocks, which are basically smaller companies. If we look at small cap ETFs like IJR, IWM, or VB, these basically track smaller companies in the US, whereas, for example, the S&P 500 tracks the largest 500 companies in the US. And if we look at these same small cap ETFs, right, their evaluations, they seem a lot more fair relative to the S&P 500. On top of this, these small cap companies, right, in the US, they tend to be more focused on domestic stuff or focused in the US, and they tend to rely more on borrowing money to operate day to day. Meaning with the Trump administration's, their large focus on domestic growth combined with the Federal Reserve likely lowering their rates, and again, less overvaluation, right, I believe certain smaller companies could benefit next year as well. Next, I'm also going to be tracking international markets a lot more closely in 2026. This might come as a surprise, but stock market gains in the rest of the world actually outpaced US stocks last year. The S&P 500 ended 2025 up 17%, whereas the MSCI All Country World, excluding the US index, which basically measures the stock market performance around the world, like in Brazil and China, India, Korea, etc., again, excluding the US, was up 29% by the end of 2025, which is the highest margin that we've seen since the global financial crisis in 2009. Why did this happen? I believe the main reasons are, one, just concerns around high valuations in US stocks, right, that we mentioned earlier, Trump's unconventional economic policies, and just a general rebound in economic growth around the world. I see a similar scenario playing out in 2026 as international markets, right? They seem to have a more reasonable valuation. Foreign central banks are lowering their rates and just a continued rebound in economic growth around the world. That should really help the markets outside of the US. And the next thing I'm looking at, and just to give you some context, I believe that the US dollar will continue to weaken into 2026. I also believe that foreign countries will continue to purchase precious metals like gold to diversify their holdings away from US treasuries and the US dollar, because from 2025, they were starting to see just how volatile and uncertain the US economy and the US dollar could be, just based on international policies that the Trump administration has decided to pursue. And while gold and silver have performed really well in 2025, I personally don't expect it to continue into 2026. And I'll make a video on why I believe this in the next couple of weeks. With that said, I am more bullish on crypto. More specifically, Bitcoin and Ethereum as a way to hedge against the US dollar. And while we did see the crypto market drop near the end of 2025, I expect the emotions and sentiments around crypto that it's not going to get worse. I believe more people are going to continue to look for ways to diversify away from the US dollar, and that it's going to be adopted in a more mainstream way. Now, no one is actually going to know with 100% certainty what is going to happen, but overall, I will say I'm cautiously optimistic going into 2026. While I believe we might see a slight correction in the next year or two, overall, I am pretty confident of the overall prospect, assuming that my assumptions hold. And if we do see a correction, right, I likely believe that it's going to be something very unexpected. And as long as whatever that is, that does happen, doesn't completely derail the economic growth that I'm anticipating in the US from everything I just mentioned, I'm going to treat it like more of a buying opportunity. So now that you've seen my 2026 investing plan, you might be wondering, how do you actually start investing if you got some cash, but you have zero experience? Well, I'll see you in the live investing workshop on February 1st. And again, you can sign up down below. Check out this video next where I break down exactly what to invest in, how to start investing step by step, and what strategy to follow to grow your money without feeling overwhelmed.